Hello and welcome to PBS Updates, a new short series from the Oncology podcast where we break down the latest changes to Australia's pharmaceutical benefits scheme and what they mean for oncology practice. This is Rachael Babin from the Oncology Network, and I'm joined by Professor Craig Underhill. In this series, we take a quick look at the recent oncology and haematology updates, what's changed, which patients may benefit, and what clinicians should know. For more detail and ongoing coverage of cancer medicines, you can also visit oncologynetwork.com.au. So, if you want a fast, practical overview of the latest PBS developments, you're in the right place. Let's get into it.
G'day, and welcome to our new series, PBS Update. It's a Kiwi-free zone because we're going to be talking about the Australian PBS, and it's a delight to have Rachael Babin here. How are you, Rachael?
I'm very well. Hello, Craig. It's nice to be your sidekick on the mic for a change rather than behind the mic.
Yes, don't be nervous. I'll be gentle.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, so why this series? Do you think this is filling a need for people?
It is something that we have had a lot of feedback on over the years when we've done our Journal Club podcast episodes. And the PBS updates have always been quite a small section in those much longer episodes. And so we thought it would be really helpful just to roll this content into a short form format, make it really accessible for the listeners so that everyone, no matter where you are in Australia, can stay up to date with the latest updates. Now, we've just had the March update a few days ago, but we're also going to highlight a couple of things from the last December update as well.
Fantastic. Yeah, we've got, of course, the big news from March 2026, the first tumour agnostic indication for ipilimumab and nivolumab. And then we'll also mention a couple of other new drugs that have gone onto the PBS in the last few months.
So yeah, Craig, our first pan-tumour listing. This is exciting. So can you tell us what's the details?
Yeah, my understanding is in the US they've had these pan-tumour listings, tumour agnostic listings for some time. This is the first one, I think, in Australia for nivolumab and ipilimumab. So it will enable pretty broad access for treatment of advanced and metastatic cancers that are deemed to be immunoresponsive. It's a real paradigm shift. It will open up access to these drugs, in particular to rare cancers, which won't have to go through the costly process of an additional listing on the PBS. But it does actually put some responsibility back to clinicians, patients in the system to use this process wisely where there is evidence. And it's going to be really interesting to see the uptake of the drugs going forward, but we'll talk about that a bit more. So this is basically going to replace a whole lot of other listings, including for unresectable stage 3 or 4 malignant melanoma, locally advanced or metastatic non-small cell lung cancer, stage 4 clear cell variant renal cell cancer, recurrent and metastatic squamous cell carcinoma of the head and neck, unresectable stage 4 malignant melanoma, stage 4 non-small cell lung cancer, advanced or metastatic gastroesophageal cancer, and unresectable metastatic urothelial carcinoma. So that was the listings for these drugs in the past. It's now going to be all replaced by one code, which means some clinicians are annoyed they had to redo prescriptions for the drugs, but I guess that's a small price to pay for this opening up of access to other indications. It will really fast track the use of these drugs as studies are published. We won't have to then go through a year or two's lag to see the drug being used.
And if we're talking about advanced and metastatic disease, there's patients that time really is of the essence. And the Minister for Health and Ageing, Mark Butler, did a big press conference and indicated that they think 5,000 patients will benefit. It's very rare to have a listing that is for rare cancers that can immediately impact so many people.
Yeah, that's right. So rare cancers, each one's rare, right? But altogether, rare cancers make up a substantial proportion of the tumour burden tumour landscape. And so as is expected, some 5,000 patients will benefit. And the real benefit is going to be in those rare cancers. We've talked on the Oncology Journal Club podcast about the most series of papers that's been run in multiple sites in Australia, including regional sites, treating patients with Nivo in some rare cancers like biliary cancer, rare gynae cancers, and we've seen that benefit. And so the difficulty is that it may take years or never to get those individual cancers listed. So the problem's now solved. There was an interesting newsletter from COSA strongly supporting this, as have other groups like the Private Cancer Physicians of Australia and the Medical Oncology Group of Australia. They sort of paused, though, and gave some guidance and said, there really does still need to be rational use of these drugs in line with the evidence base as it accumulates. There maybe needs to be some tools to support decision-making when uncertainty is high, and there needs to be adequate monitoring data collection for acute, chronic and late toxicities of the drugs in real-world settings to facilitate risk stratification, clinical and treatment decision-making, so that people can actually have robust discussions with their patients in deciding whether to use these drugs. So a colleague in Bendigo, Sam Harris, big shout out to Sam, told me recently that they were planning that to kind of recommend, not mandate, but recommend within their own service that if any of the clinicians were thinking about using this indication, the patient should be discussed at an MDT so that they discuss the evidence. And our regional trials network is considering whether we should build a database, a registry, and so that our sites could enter information on tumour type, response or not, duration of response, and any unusual toxicities. So again, we can collect that real-world evidence and help build the evidence base for the use of these drugs.
So it's cautious optimism, perhaps, or as you said, about responsible use. Yeah, it's an interesting development.
Yeah, very much.
Do you think it's going to happen more?
Well, yeah, I think, Rachel, maybe this is a test case. Maybe if the PBS and government is happy with how it goes, if it suddenly not prescribed to 50,000 Australians rather than 5,000, maybe they'll be happy and there'll be other tumour agnostic indications for other therapies as well. So it's really putting the onus back on clinicians to discuss the risk benefit with their patient and use these drugs in a rational way.
Is that empowering as a clinician, that you have a bit more freedom rather than just boxes that you tick and say, right, this is the next treatment line?
Yeah, absolutely. It's interesting of note, the indications for locally advanced metastatic tumours, and they've maintained the listing for these drugs in the neoadjuvant setting in melanoma. And there may still be then listings in other neoadjuvant or adjuvant settings. So it is empowering, I think. One of the real problems is we go to a conference, we see a landmark study, clear benefit to patients presented and discussed, and then there can be a year or two or more delay in getting the drug listed, and we're sitting across the desk from patients who could benefit from that drug. So empowerment is a good word. Empowerment with responsibility as well as a group, as an industry, to use these drugs wisely. They're not without life-changing consequences if patients have serious side effects.
And so do you think this will have an impact internationally? Do you think other countries will be looking at us and thinking?
Well, yeah, that's a good question. The Australian drug reimbursement system is seen internationally as probably one of the most robust, one of the benchmarks. So it is possible that other countries will look at that and consider the same approach.
Fantastic. And so what else is important for the listeners to know about Greg? Anything from December?
So there's been a couple of other interesting drugs listed recently. I'm going to say this wrong, I'm sure, but people can mock me later. Toripalimab for recurrent or metastatic nasopharyngeal carcinoma. So this is based on a study called the Jupiter 2 study, and that was a study of adding toripalimab, a PD-1 inhibitor, to standard chemotherapy, phase 3 study done in China, Taiwan and Singapore. And this drug got a listing in the US The study showed a progression-free survival difference of 21 months versus 8 months, which was the primary endpoint of the study. But median survival with a follow-up of 36 months showed a significant improvement as well. It was not reached in the Toripalimab group and 33 months in the placebo group, but the hazard ratio was 0.63. It was highly significant. This drug has immune-related adverse events as we'd expect from a PD-L1 inhibitor, with immune-related adverse events seen in 54% patients, grade 3 or higher, 9.6, so that's people admitted to hospital in about 10% of patients. So it comes back to that previous discussion about Nivo, which is higher rate of grade 3. These are not insubstantial drugs to give, but nevertheless a clear benefit. So this is a relatively rare cancer in the Australian population, much higher prevalence in Southeast Asia and China. And so, again, this is the first time that we've seen this drug listed in Australia.
Also of note was the December listing of Cabozantinib. What's your thoughts on that?
It's got a listing previously been used in recurrent clear cell carcinoma and other renal cancers, but now it has a listing in pancreatic and extrapancreatic neuroendocrine tumours. And that was based on, again, a single study, a phase 3 study in 2 cohorts of patients, one with progressive extrapancreatic neuroendocrine tumour and another cohort of pancreatic neuroendocrine tumours. These patients all have had to have failed radionuclide treatment and targeted therapy or both. But again, this drug was active. The primary endpoint was progression-free survival. The difference was 13.8 months versus 4 months. And the data as published, the overall survival data was immature, but on the basis of this study called Cabernet, that's Cabernet, Cabinet, not Cabernet the wine, but Cabernet as in the cabinet. This drug's listed now in Australia for these rare neuroendocrine tumours.
Fantastic. So we go from a large group of patients affected in the March update to smaller groups.
Exactly.
Yeah.
This is one of the dangers now with the Nivo listing. Will that kind of study like Cabernet get done, or will people just start throwing Nivo at their patients who progress standard therapy? So I think, again, we still need to support people accessing clinical trials and putting people on clinical trials as a first manoeuvre rather than Nivo now just default in everybody.
Yeah, that's an interesting point, how the clinical trials landscape might be impacted over the coming years. This is a nuanced situation.
Yeah, that's right. Then the last one I wanted to mention was Toripalimab, which is a bispecific antibody now approved in Australia for refractory or relapsed diffuse large B-cell lymphoma. That is a drug I haven't had personal experience in using, but I think it's probably the first bispecific antibody that's been approved in Australia. If anyone knows otherwise, please message us on our WhatsApp group. You can go onto the Journal Club tab on the Oncology Network website, click on the WhatsApp icon and send us a comment or a voice note about this issue or anything else we've mentioned today. Be interested in people's feedback. So this drug attaches to the CD20 antigens on the lymphoma cells and the CD3 antigens on the T cell, bringing them together, and then the T cell releases cytokines that can directly attack the lymphoma. So that's the biological kind of rationale. And so, yeah, this drug is now approved for these refractory patients.
Well, fantastic. And thank you for including a haematology update as well. We know we have haematology listeners, and indeed, as you yourself did, clinicians that are working across regional rural areas, medical oncology and haematology. So thanks for including that one. And thank you also for mentioning about the new voice notes WhatsApp system we've set up. So please tell us if it's helpful. Give us your feedback. Tell us if there's something else that you think we should be mentioning. We always love to hear from our listeners.
Yeah, and I'm just wondering, industry people might want to message us about any compassionate access schemes, which are quite hard sometimes for people to know about and keep up with. And so if you have a compassionate access scheme opening, let us know and we'll mention it on the podcast as well.
Absolutely. So we do have a whole industry spotlight section on the website. So that's oncologynetwork.com.au. If you go to industry spotlight, you'll see there all the cancer drugs news updates. We have coverage on some of the things that we've talked about as well. So a bit more in-depth information if people would like to learn more. So yeah, get in touch and let us know what you think. We hope it's helpful.
Thank you, Rachel. I think it is important, though, just to remember our disclaimer for this segment.
Absolutely, please. Go ahead, Craig.
Please don't take what we say at face value. Please do your own research, do your own due diligence, check the drug indication, be across the efficacy and toxicity data, discuss it with your patients before embarking on prescribing any of these bloody difficult-to-say drugs.
Perfect. Thank you, Craig.
See you next time.
See you next time for the next PBS update. Thank you. That's all for this episode of PBS Updates. For more information on the listings we discussed and for ongoing coverage of cancer medicines, visit oncologynetwork.com.au, where you'll find news, analysis, and resources for oncology professionals. If you're working in industry and have details of compassionate access schemes or upcoming PBS changes you'd like us to share with the oncology community, feel free to get in touch. And don't forget to check out the Oncology Journal Club podcast if you'd like to hear more analysis and pearls of wisdom from Professor Craig Underhill. This podcast is proudly produced by the Oncology Network. Thanks for listening.